Welcome to Establish the Edge. I am your host, Mike Leone, talking a little bit about playoff fantasy contests this week, specifically the Underdog Best Ball contest. I've got Justin Herzig, co-founder of Own the Moment, contributor at Establish the Run, joining me. Before I throw it to Justin, make sure you check out last week's episode where we also talked best ball with Madison Parkhill of RotoViz, kind of dissecting our best ball teams, reviewing some hits, some mistakes we made, and kind of previewing what the playoff contest in terms of the regular season Underdog playoff contest might look like. But today we're looking at the real NFL playoff contests, and no man better to do that with than Justin Herzig. So Justin, thanks for joining me.
Cheers. Yeah, that was a fantastic podcast you guys did last week. And I love that it kind of just organically stemmed from that Twitter conversation. And I mean, best ball is great. I love best ball, but the only thing I love more is playoff best ball. This is without a doubt the best time of year because the level of all the contests, it's all game theory. It's all strategy. The actual player projections, like your bread and butter. I'm sorry, Leone, but it's just not as important now. This is where our game theory bros come out and play.
Don't worry, I got some ways to galaxy brain. I love the FFPC playoff contest. I really like the galaxy brain that. I had a buddy whip up an actual optimizer for me, kind of based on how the playoff brackets would go, like the odds that certain players would be in the optimal lineup. So we'll definitely do a show on that when we get closer to that, but that's not a draft scenario. So you're going to have up until the game's lock, that first weekend of the wild card to do your FFPC teams. Meanwhile, Justin, we have best ball and Underdog that is drafting right now. And I just looked, I'm going to share my screen, throw it up here. This is the ADP of their playoff contest right now, which is almost it's more than halfway filled. I'm sure we'll see another one once that fills. So this is going to be applicable even if this specific contest fills. But the rules are the same as last year. And you wrote an article for us on Established Run last year that I think is still applicable. People should check it out. You want to give a brief overview? I know you really focused on understanding the rules of this contest because a lot of people dive in and might not understand, and they just start picking their favorite player values, and they're going to have they're basically going to be drawing dead, even though they might have a team that looks good on paper.
Yeah. So high level, the rules are the same from everything that I've seen. So there is a level of kind of greenfield to this article. Go ahead, read it. But at a high level, you are drafting against 5 others. So there are 6 people in each draft. You are drafting 10 different players, and you are starting each week 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 wide receiver / tight ends, and then 1 flex that's not QB. So then you'll have those 5 other bench spots. And it is best ball style, but similar to the playoffs of the best ball contest, it is week by week. It is not cumulative. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you advance out of each round and then make it to that final week for the Super Bowl, the championship. And how to advance. So for the first round, you need to finish in the top 2 out of 6. The next 2 rounds, you need to finish first out of your new pool. So it's finish top 2, finish first, and then you make it to the championship. And the championship differs in size based off how large the contest is. And yes, we have one right now. It's a decent size, 10K up to first. But I have high levels of confidence, and I know how much Underdog loves building, putting these out there, that we're going to see some more contests over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully some big stuff, some big fun.
Yeah, and with the understanding of those rules, you had some takeaways in your article last year, but in general, I think you see people build teams wrong in both directions, not understanding the rules. One, they're not building to have a team that can, start a player at every position in the Super Bowl round, by not stacking enough from teams on the AFC, NFC side, or people. And this is where I got into trouble last year. I was like, oh, I understand that. I get that. I grasp that mentally. And I sort of overstacked and then didn't even make teams out of the wild card round, so you got to be kind of split the difference there a little bit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, and even right now, when you're drafting now, we still don't even have kind of clarity on who's going to have the 1 seed. And the AFC, I think the Patriots are the favorite, and they're still only 45% according to 538. In the NFC side, you've got Cardinals as the favorite at 44%, but there are other options there. So you have to keep in mind, I personally am all about the drafting 1 quarterback strategy, because if I can draft a quarterback from a wild card game and expecting that team makes it to the Super Bowl, that quarterback's probably putting up enough points that it's not worth me wasting a spot with another quarterback who may get some additional value in like an early round or two. Like, it's not worth it. But if you're drafting Kyler Murray and the Cardinals do get that bye, well, now you're probably not going to make it out of that wild card that first round. To what you said, though, Leone, though, like, I think the problem is, and like, yeah, you can always go too far the other way, but I think in general, people kind of worry about that wild card round a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your only opportunity, that you only have to finish top 2. So like and expect that, hey, if you're not drafting a lot of the kind of first round teams, there's already probably a dead team or two in there as well. So I'm more willing to take chances in that wild card round, expecting that, hey, I'm going to try to, my goal is to continue to make it through all the way to that championship game. And in that championship game, have the best possible team. And yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. You hit on the one quarterback strategy. As far as running backs versus wide receivers, tight ends, you can start maximum of 2 running backs each week. You could possibly get up to 3 wide receiver tight ends. So that's going to change roster construction a little bit. You'll probably want some heavier wide receiver tight end teams. And there's probably some like unique players you can even grab in those types of builds if you're stacking, especially in these tournaments that are drafting now, where there's so many teams available to us in the player pool. Like, and we'll look at the entire playoff picture in a second here, but once the teams get whittled down to the 12 or the 14 that we know are going to make it, it might be a little bit harder to get unique, at the back end of drafts. But for this draft, it's probably going to finish over the next week. If there are some opportunities to get unique with stacking at the back end of your draft, and wide receiver tight end is a spot it makes sense to do that with.
Yeah, no, I like that. And so for my running backs, rarely ever drafting more than 3 running backs. For the most part, I'm drafting 2, and often I'm only drafting 1 if I know that, like, hey, I've got a real stud. Unfortunately, in the playoffs this year, for the stronger teams, there's not really many like 1 running back studs. Like, I guess Leonard Fournette, I know, trigger warning, but he's probably the closest to like a true stud for a team that like we expected to make it decently far. And I'll run through some other teams. Like, yeah, we love Jonathan Taylor. We would love Derrick Henry if they're healthy. But like those teams, Titans actually are like 98% to make the playoffs. They're looking good, but Henry has his health issues. Jonathan Taylor would be great, but they're only like 56% to make the playoffs right now because they have very difficult opponents coming up with New England and Arizona. Eckler's probably a strong one, but he
stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's probably the strongest one. And like his ADP is still lagging a bit because before they beat Cincy, they were kind of on the edge of making the playoffs. But then you have a lot of these others that like I don't want to call it a full committee, but Green Bay, Los Angeles Rams, Dallas, Kansas City, like you have multiple running backs being used there. And so that's where my 1 RB strategy isn't as strong as it was last year.
Yeah, and I'm trying to even think where to go from this because like there's so many elements, which is what makes this game so much fun. But one thing we were talking about before we look at the playoff picture, but just heading when we were talking to each other before we went live, I was like kind of joking that Leonard Fournette's ADP was the 2nd overall, and you made a really good point that prior to ADP shifting and pushing Tampa Bay up a little bit higher, you were actually taking Fournette kind of early with the understanding that the way the ADPs had lined up at that time, you could go Fournette, Godwin, Evans, Brady in the first 4 rounds and just get this mega stack. So you weren't drafting Fournette, 1st or 2nd overall necessarily because you thought he was, quote unquote, the best value in a vacuum there. You were drafting him just with the understanding of how the overall roster construction of your team would work, which was like, hey, I'm going to get the Super Bowl favorite stacked. Like that's kind of nuts to be able to get potentially the top 4 scoring players on the team that's most favored to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think you're bringing up 2 very good points here. One is how should we be thinking about ADP? And 2 is how should we be thinking about our roster construction and building our teams? And so we'll start with the latter point because that's where you were going around. My goal coming out of these drafts is to have the best players on 2 or 3 teams. Obviously, if it's 2 teams, we want one to be 1 AFC, 1 NFC. And if it's 3, we obviously want at least 1 to be in the opposite conference. But the general idea is I want to go for the best players. I would rather have, let's say, Bengals right now. Let's go with we'll go with the Colts, because the Colts are only like 54% to make the playoffs. But like, I'd rather have Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman, who, if the Colts do thrive, if they do succeed, it's likely going to be at the helms of those two, versus having someone like Odell Beckham and Van Jefferson, where yes, the Rams, and maybe the Rams actually aren't more likely, but maybe Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson's a good example where they're like actually favorites out of the AFC. If though, that's a tough one too. I'm going to go back to the Rams one. But my point with the Rams was, if the Rams make it, it's Cooper Kupp who's really going to be dominating the points. And so it's going to be hard to win that final week without Cooper Kupp. So yes, Van Jefferson, Odell Beckham, like, will probably get you points, but it's unlikely when you get to that Super Bowl winning week that you have the best players from that team. I'd rather take the team that's less likely to make it there. But if they do, I've got the studs on that team.
Yeah, the Drew Dinkmeyer, what do you win when you win? You kind of have to think of this as like a giant decision tree, So it's like, okay, I didn't draft Cooper Kupp. In what scenario that I draft Odell Beckham am I going to be able to win? And it's like, if Kupp gets hurt and the Rams go to the Super Bowl, but like that's, it's possible, but it seems like there are more opportunities that are better. It's your point of just stacking. And I know last year you were heavy on the Browns and it made a ton of sense, even though, and it almost did work out. Actually, they almost beat Kansas City last year in the playoffs, but it was like, you could get Chubb, you could get exactly what you said. Like you get Chubb, Hunt, you could get, Landry last year, Baker, like you could get the team's core players, and it didn't necessarily matter that they were better or worse fantasy players or that they were unlikely to advance, because if they had advanced, nobody else is going to have that, the top, 3 to 4 players on that team. In general, do you think this is kind of unique to last year where this contest is going to fill? But last year we had the dynamic of some people drafted with a few weeks left in the regular season. Most people drafted kind of the last week of the regular season or the week, leading up to the actual games, if I'm remembering correctly. If we get a bigger contest after this, potentially, where would you rather have your teams drafted, now or when the playoff teams are more known?
I want to draft both, but how I'm drafting is different. The way that I've been drafting this is, as you said, yes, it's going to fill significantly before the actual playoffs, but there still was a 3-week stretch where there was differing kind of teams and opinions and stuff. And so a lot of people I was seeing on Twitter were like, hey, I'm going to focus really on the teams that I know are going to make the playoffs because I don't want to take chances on those others. And I was the opposite. I was like, no, this is when I want to take chances on the others. The Chargers were the team that I was going hard on, where prior to beating the Bengals, they were really on the fence whether they made it. That allowed me to get Eckler, Herbert, Keenan, Mike with like 4 of my last 5 picks almost every time. They get one big win, and now they're what? They are 78% to make the playoffs. Like, that's where the opportunity was. Yeah, I took a bit of a chance early on, but if that comes to fruition, like, I've got a huge lead there. The ADP was a bit of a kind of outlier because going forward, the new contest will use this ADP. So we're not going to have that Tampa situation like we had to begin with. But there is still edge on, hey, we as humans fear uncertainty. We move away from uncertainty. We as DFS players, we need to thrive in uncertainty. We need to embrace it. And that's what I think the opportunity is as you're further away from the playoffs. As we get closer, that's where you can get more certain with your strategy. That's when you can go with one quarterback, maybe one running back, because there's not a chance that those players, A, are going to miss the playoffs and then your team's dead, or B, they get the bye and then you don't get out of the wild card. So that's when I'm willing to adapt a more fragile build within my teams versus now I'm going fragile with which teams I choose.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You're shifting the risk reward. The risk now is on, gambling on teams that maybe don't make the playoffs, but you have stud rosters if they do, versus later on, your risk is just kind of a systemic roster construction risk where I'm only taking one quarterback because I know I'm getting this quarterback for potentially 4 rounds. And, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And, you pointed me to 538, which is kind of interesting. You can play with the playoff scenarios. Like we got Pittsburgh, Minnesota playing each other tonight. And if the Vikings win this game, they shoot up from 13% basically dead to 38%. Whereas, then the Steelers are in a somewhat similar spot. They go from 18%, they double that. So they're still kind of low. There's probably some higher leverage ones, like this 49ers Bengals game is pretty huge.
Yeah, those are two teams that neither of them need to win, but they're in significantly worse situations if they lose.
If San Francisco wins, they jump to 80%. And, that's,
the
you're
Washington Dallas is probably the one that's most interesting to me, because right now Washington's 50%. They're not, they're home against Dallas. I don't know what the line is, but it's probably pretty close. Maybe Dallas is like 3-point favorite or something, to my guess. But if Washington wins this, they go from 51 up to 69%. Like, that's a huge, because they're getting a divisional win. They're moving to 8-6. That's an opportunity where, like, hey, if middle of that game, you see Washington's up 17-0, go ahead and start drafting your Washington teams, because they're most likely making the playoffs. And Terry and Gibson are basically free in best ball drafts right now. I know you're looking at ADP if you want to discuss.
Yeah, Gibson's 58.9, which how many rounds are we again, Justin?
There's only 60 picks. That basically means he's drafted in probably like 10 to 20% of leagues.
Yeah, so 10 rounds.
16.
Yeah, so you can get them. You've been able to get them in rounds 9 and 10 pretty routinely.
Oh, 100%. I'll admit, I haven't actually been going after them, because I guess part of me is also I just don't have that much faith in the Washington team, and I think they'll still probably lose in the first round. But again, that's, like when the Chargers were on the edge, I love that Chargers team. So I think if they can make the playoffs, they're a team that can actually make noise in the playoffs. Washington, not so much for me. I have drafted some 49ers for the similar logic. Don't love that they lost last week in that Seattle game, but that's a team where, like, the players that I like are, hey, if you can get Debo decently priced, you can get, I'm assuming Elijah Mitchell is going to be healthy by that time. You've got we saw the Kittle breakout last week. That's a basically free team for a team that, like, has about a little better than a coin flip of still making the playoffs.
That's a really good one. Look at, like, balancing that it's not that far out that they make the playoffs. They're better than a coin flip, as you mentioned, and like the upside is significant there in terms of team strength and the amount of fantasy points they can score. I guess the amount of fantasy points they can score is almost moot, because whichever team goes to Super Bowl is gonna put up the most fantasy points.
But like Cardinals scare me right now from a team, because yes, they have that first round bye, but also, like, they're spreading that ball out so much. And Chase Edmonds is supposed to come back this week, if not this week, next. Like, you don't have a slam dunk running back slot. DeAndre Hopkins isn't getting the same level of volume that he was before, but because they're like, so Edmonds is the only value on, but if you look at the other prices, you can type in Cardinals or Arizona and it'll show the whole team.
I always forget that trick.
I love that. But yeah, so I mean, like, Kyler and Hopkins are still basically second round picks for a team that's decent. Coin flip to get a first round bye. And other than Kyler, like, they just spread it out so much.
So isn't the counter to that, though, like, if they go to the Super Bowl, aren't you going to need them anyways? Or, like, what would you say to that? Like, you'd rather just have the AFC side of that Super Bowl game? Or
if a team on a bye makes it to the Super Bowl, I'm probably not winning this tournament. And that's just a risk that I am willing to take. Because the teams that end, if the team that has already with the bye ends up making the Super Bowl, there's just a lot of randomness that's going to come into play, because you needed to advance past the early round. So getting really lucky on just who were those kind of spike hits in the wild card game, and then still have players for that, bye team in the Super Bowl. I think, like, my teams are still set up for, if I can do if I'm doing a 3-teamer, which means I'll probably do like a 4-4-2 or a 3-3-4 build. And maybe then my 3 are like Kyler, Hopkins, Edmonds, or maybe it's Kyler, Kirk, Edmonds, where, like, it's getting value down there. Now I'm setting myself to, like, decent chance in the Super Bowl, but, like, I'm not really, I don't know. It's tough to not have 5 of a team, or at least 4 of a team, unless they have that bye.
So we're kind of right now intuitively trying to mesh up the odds a team makes the playoffs with where we can get their best players, how concentrated that is, and, like, if this team can make noise is kind of what, like, you're intuitively weighing when you're deciding whether to go in on a team. And yeah, it's too bad. I could see that Chargers opportunity last week. Now they're at 78%, and they're, you you know exactly who you want from that team. I guess, like, how risky do you get on these playoff teams? Once we get past Washington, you know, we're at the teams that are below 50%. I guess the Bengals are at 44% as well. Are you taking chances on those teams at all? Or are you going to wait to see if they win a game and kind of bump those odds up closer to 50-50 or a little higher?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to whether or not I have faith in that team being able to actually make noise or at least win a game in the playoffs, but more so make it to the Super Bowl. Because at the end of the day, I'm building teams that, you know, my only goal for these teams is that they make it to the Super Bowl and they have a chance at winning the Super Bowl. So if I, you know, just don't have any faith in Washington, maybe they squeak out a game, but like, even if like, hey, they have that first great game, but I'm having on Washington lose that second round, like, I don't know, that team's mostly dust. Like maybe it gets you know, it'll get a min cash or something like that. So that's where, like, I think I'd be on the other side for, let's say the Bills. So Bills have Tampa, Carolina. Let's give them 2 losses to Tampa and Carolina. I know, sorry, but
yeah, come on. This is torture.
I know. Well, the first one, I don't know. So now they're 30% after losing to Tampa and Carolina. They've got a game at New England, not going to be easy. That's when I'd be willing to take some strong chances on the Bills because I still have faith in that team. Obviously, after having these 2 losses, it would look bad, but like, I think the public would then be down on them. I know you were already tweeting about how the public is down on the Bills right now, but like, that's where I could think they could still make a run to that Super Bowl. And so even though they're only 30% to make the playoffs, it's a team I still want. And if you look at their prices right now, outside of Diggs and Allen, everyone else is very cheap.
Yeah, it's actually not that bad because you could get Diggs, Allen in 2-3, you know, depending where you're picking, which seems kind of interesting to me. And then, you know, just kind of your pick of backfilling the wide receivers. You know, tough to get it back from them right now. But
so let's say for this draft, what you could reasonably do is go Devontae Adams 1 or 2. Like whenever you grab Devontae Adams, you grab the stud Packer. You then grab Diggs and Allen with 2-3, and in that scenario, you don't need to worry about Rodgers.
Yeah, you can jump back to Dylan.
Yeah, and I mean, Aaron Jones may even fall in there and stuff, but like, you've got the opportunity now where you're saying, hey, I believe this is going to be a Bills-Packers Super Bowl. I don't need to worry about Aaron Rodgers because I've already got one quarterback who's not going to play in the bye. And if Josh Allen makes the Super Bowl, he's going to put up solid points, every week. So don't worry about that. And the rest of those players are all very late players. I mean, maybe Dylan's the only one in the middle of the draft, but all the others. So now you can kind of pick out, maybe there's one other team where you want to sprinkle in some studs who have a chance to maybe at least win a game or 2 to help you advance in those rounds. And those would be guys like, maybe I'm thinking the late round.
Wouldn't like Jonathan Taylor be a good pick on that team? Like if,
he's so
I guess, no, he's going too early. So he'd screw up your early start.
Yeah. But Eckler, we keep going back to Chargers.
Yeah.
But like, you could definitely grab Eckler and probably Keenan or Mike Williams and maybe even both. And like, now you're going, there's your 3-team build. And the challenge. So what I wouldn't do though, actually, to be honest, is if I'm going with Josh Allen as my only QB, I would want to grab guys on the NFC team. So then, because if you're building the Eckler and Keenan and you don't have Herbert, if they make it to the Super Bowl against the Packers, you don't have a QB. I'd rather have guys who are a bit more of a reach, but on the NFC side. So if the Packers don't make it and instead the Cowboys do, and you grabbed, maybe Cooper and Gallup or something, you still have a chance of kind of having the best lineup in the Super Bowl because you've got the Josh Allen, you maybe have Tony Pollard, and then you've got some guys sprinkled around.
Yeah, and you can see where that makes sense as far as those 2 teams lining up, because you can go and like the decision between if I'm doing like a 2-team stack or a 3-team stack, this one makes a ton of sense to me because it's like Allen, Diggs, late wide receivers, Devontae Adams to start, try and get one of the Packers running backs. And, you're already covered for the Super Bowl matchup there. Right. And, and then it's like, and this was kind of what you were saying too, with like the Odell Beckhams, but at that point, like, what's your extra value added of taking like Marquez Valdes-Scantling to, make the stack even bigger? Like I don't know but I think essentially what you're saying is at that point, you're better off taking, some like Dallas as a 3rd team than really piling on this Packers stack. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, so you have 10 spots. So in this situation, we've got Josh Allen and Diggs as 2 spots. You've got Devontae as 1, and you have Dylan as 1. That's 4. I probably want to still have another MVS and another Beasley or Knox or something like that to get. And I mean, that's 6. That still gives you 4 more. And so it's those middle rounds where I'm grabbing those, whether it's the Amari Cooper, Tony Pollard, if you're going with the Odell Beckham, Van Jefferson, but like that's where I want to grab more players in the middle. But because the beauty of both the Packers and the Bills having their complementary guys be so late in the draft, I can still end up with maybe like 7 between the Packers and Bills, which is a good number for the Super Bowl. But let's say the Packers do lose to the Cowboys. Well, I have now what we said, Diggs, Allen, Beasley, and Knox, so maybe 4 there. And now I've got 3 from the Cowboys of Cooper, Gallup, and Pollard. And that's still a pretty good Super Bowl matchup, even though I don't have Lamb and Zeke.
What's an example of like a 2-team stack? Like I'm looking like you noted the Buccaneers ADPs have come up. Like Bucks Chargers looks like it would have been a really good one.
Yeah.
Do you have one off the top of your head that's like, you're just doing 2 teams?
Yeah, that we can still do. So if you go to the top of ADP, let's think through that. Because it's really those first 2 picks. And so when I think about the Chiefs, I usually don't go with just a 2 team because there's really only like maybe 3 or 4 players on the Chiefs that you'd want. So you have to go really heavy with another. I think LA Rams is probably the best one to go with a 2. So you start off the draft.
Let me interject right before you start there. Just out of curiosity, if you're at like the 5-6 turn, I guess that's probably not happening. I was wondering like if you would start Tyreek, Kelsey, and at that point, like just pray that Mahomes, like maybe people are going to pass on Mahomes because they can't stack them. But I guess it probably seems unlikely you could start Tyreek, Kelsey.
I've done it once in about 90 drafts so far.
Okay.
And I think Kelsey's dropped a little more early. When we started this, it was Tyreek and Kelsey were 2-3. So it was almost impossible. Similarly, like Devontae and Aaron Jones is now actually attainable. Early in the drafts, it wasn't. So let's say you're going to go with the Rams stack. And so you can go first round Cooper Kupp. You can go third round Darrell Henderson. You then have Odell and Van Jefferson. And because that's a high enough powered offense that there's a lot of people who can eat, all the way down to Tyler Higbee, who like eventually is going to get past that 1-yard line. Like
not when I play him in DFS, but
it's pretty crazy. But like what? Cooper Kupp, Darrell Henderson, Matt Stafford, Odell Beckham, Van Jefferson, and let's say Tyler Higbee. That's 6 people that I'd be pretty happy with having on my team. You can then find an AFC team that maybe, I don't know, Bills wouldn't be too bad. The Bills
I was going to say the Bills actually kind of they like, that's the biggest issue is the lack of a running back.
Yeah. But you could
some of these teams are just have running back issues, man. Like
Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Justin Herbert. Now you've got 6'4". You went with 2 quarterbacks, which is probably okay, but like there's a potential build.
Yeah. What are you doing with, we mentioned, Arizona is kind of frustrating because they're spread out and their ADPs are rich. What about like New England? They've got a couple backs and the backs don't look good. You've got Damian Harris and Ramondre, but kind of a dull team. Have you drafted any New England as part of stacks?
It's tough. And like, I never plan for it. I never leave that feeling good. Occasionally what I'll do is if I did go with a single quarterback in the NFC, I will then kind of sprinkle in a Damian and Ramondre Stevenson to pair with another AFC running back and just say like, hey, those are my 3 running backs. Because I mean, like, it's tough because if the Patriots make it to the Super Bowl, you're going to probably need some Patriots to win this. But like, you're also not needing Patriots for basically any other round. Like Damian Harris had that. He broke out that one. Sorry, don't mean to trigger.
God, it just keeps coming back to that tough loss. That's okay.
But you heard him at least. I don't know. But like, I don't know. You're just not expecting that to be a high-powered offense. So the only time those points would really be applicable is in the Super Bowl. So I'd rather not go a full stack there because I think those teams just get burned out. But I'm fine with probably doing a sprinkle of like a Damian and a Jacoby Myers or something. Is it surprising you that Kendrick Bourne is being drafted higher than Jacoby Myers?
Yeah, that feels like recency bias to me.
Same here.
I think the target share on Jacoby is like meaningfully higher. And he scored a touchdown finally. Okay, he's broken I know Bourne's made some really good plays lately, but yeah, I think Jacoby would definitely be my pick there. One other kind of like structural question this guy in chat's been asking a lot, but he's asking about max entering and if it's beneficial. And I got a question on this in the ETR Discord too, where someone was worried that, if they're just doing 10 entries, right? Are they minus EV because other people have 150? And I'll give my take because I feel like pretty clearly it's not a big deal if other people are max entering. This isn't like even in DFS, I think this is like an overrated type of thing, but like at least I can see the logic a little bit more in DFS where, other people can cover more combos and whatnot. But like these are all individual drafts and you're not competing against all these teams all at the same time. So my thought process is if you're plus EV in your drafts, you're going to be plus EV in the contest, whether you do 10, 20, 150. I don't know. What do you think about, someone who can only afford to do, maybe 10, 20 contest entries and other people are doing 150 like yourself?
Right. So no, I agree with you. But what I will say is, because I've seen some people and I talked to some who are like, no, I just don't have the bankroll to take the risk that you're taking, Justin. You are building with trying to get that first place. I can't afford myself to have so many teams not advance out of the first round and me just to take a huge loss. I understand that, but my advice would be not to then draft suboptimally, but draft fewer teams and say, hey, I'm willing to cut my bankroll down a little, but I'm still drafting the best possible way and going for that top. And so rather than drafting 50, but playing it really safe, or even 30 and playing it safer because you're like, I can't afford to lose all this, draft 10, but play those 10 playing for that high upside. Because if you want to go to the prize pool real quick, I think it's 10K to first and maybe 4K to second or third. Let's see.
Yeah 4K to second, 2K to third, 1376 to fourth.
That's where they had some extra cash. I've got some experience making tournament payouts over the past couple of months, and it gets a little funny. I haven't had the 1376 option, but yeah.
But I'm glad you brought that up because honestly, I was having a conversation with someone about DFS, and I feel like the worst place you can be in DFS is when you really want to win a big prize, but you don't want to lose, and that's when you're making the worst teams possible because you're doing exactly what you said. You're not building optimally for the contest because you're so afraid of losing that entry fee. And that's always, an indicator to scale back. Like it's much better to scale back and play correctly than it is to be like, well, oh, but I really want this, 50K prize, which means I got to play, this $400 entry instead of just being like, okay, I'll play the $100 entry and, have a capped ceiling, but like have a much more realistic chance of winning that. And it's not as much of a sweat if you don't, if you do play like the correct contrarian style or whatever, and you come up with goose eggs, so be it.
Yeah. I mean, this is life, right? Like you and I have been talking about this from a business perspective too. Like businesses need to be willing to take some chances. You've got to be able to kind of, hey, as an individual across, like, I know that this is the right decision. I need to figure out what is preventing me from making it and then decide whether or not that is a true blocker or whether it's a true obstacle that I should actually heed or whether it's a blocker that's just getting in my way. And in this situation, your concern about not min cashing is just a mental blocker. And so if you need to then, if you need to shift how much money you're putting, how much money you're allocating to limit how much you can potentially lose, that's perfectly okay. But you shouldn't decrease your expected odds. You shouldn't decrease and go with a suboptimal strategy just because you need to kind of make sure you save a little money or not lose so much money.
Never middle, Justin. Never middle.
Oh, never middle. I like it. Always be drafting and never middle.
My top two best ball teams, I've got a 0 RB team and a hyper fragile team. Just never middle. Okay.
I can't.
How long does it take to draft
through all those teams? Okay, so what? If you're 30 seconds a pick, it would take about, if you're doing 15 seconds a pick, it would take like 15 minutes. My guess is they usually take around 10 minutes.
Gotcha.
So
do you want to do one before we do talk on the moment? I don't know if you have enough time or not.
Well, no, I'm fine. Let's click it and see how long it is to fill. I'm sure people in chat, look at that. You got to get okay.
You've got me itching. That's part of the reason why I do these podcasts. Because full disclosure, like I have not entered yet, but now I'm like, chomping. Oh, we're filled. Okay. Well, now we have no choice.
We got some listeners, All right.
Okay.
Ooh,
Okay.
we're sitting at that turn. Okay, I like that. That's
I don't think anybody should draft Chiefs. They're just terrible. The offense is dead. Don't draft them, guys.
Like it. And I mean, like, yeah, it's interesting. So we were talking about just kind of planning like a content strategy and stuff and figuring out like what is the most valuable, things to kind of create for this. Because obviously we have that article from last year. I can make some small tinkers to it. But at the end of the day, like the strategy is still pretty solid. Leone was talking about like maybe making projections for this, which we can obviously do based off like, win expectancy for each team and their kind of per game. But I think what's really most valuable is mapping out which teams, like maybe rank the players within the teams and then how those teams can kind of stack together. Because, for example, you're not going to get a great stack with Tampa and Kansas City just because they're all being drafted so high. But where can you maybe get a great stack later on where the running back maybe is getting drafted a little later and you went heavy on the wide receiver, tight ends for the opposite team? I think that's at least how I think through my approach and would be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think at the turn here where like I see that Buffalo potential with Diggs, like they just seem underpriced to me. But then if you go Aaron Jones, you've already lost out on Adams. If you go Godwin, you've lost out on Fournette. Like, at what level am I overthinking? Like, should we be jumping to a different NFC team because of that, or am I overthinking it?
Oh, I think that's all completely fair. So
Diggs goes, so it doesn't matter.
There you go. But, I mean, if Cooper Kupp's available, I think
that's the smash.
Yeah. And there's a Henderson so far that we could potentially get Henderson at the next turn.
So Kupp goes. This feels like a weird spot because you've lost out on a teammate on all the top players already, right?
In this situation, I would probably go Kelsey Mahomes because there's very few teams that have Tyreek, Kelsey, and Mahomes. As I said, I've done it once in like 90 drafts. So I don't think I'm at a disadvantage here. As what you said, if you go Godwin, others have Evans and Fournette. If you go Jones, people are getting Devontae and Aaron Jones. You could go
Casey goes to the Super Bowl. There's not that many Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill teams out there that you're susceptible to. And the chances of those teams being, built correctly is probably small if there's not that many to begin with.
Right. And so in this situation, you could have gone Kyler Hopkins, but I've already given my concerns about Hopkins. And especially if they get the bye, you now you spent your first 2 picks on a team that's not going to play in the first round. That's highly risky.
So the CEH ADP is kind of annoying at 24, but then it's like literally nothing.
So I would definitely at least star CEH just so we have them available. And so I'll let you start off. Like, what are your thoughts on the NFC? Who do you think might be a good partner here?
Yeah. I mean, if CeeDee Lamb falls, it kind of feels like Dallas would be pretty strong. Like no one's gone on them.
Yeah, no, I can completely agree that that would be my go-to play because I feel that Zeke is actually falling a lot further than he actually should, just because of the general echo around. Definitely is hurt, but they still have a big commitment to him. If the Cowboys do make it to the Super Bowl, you're crazy to think that it's not like Zeke's not playing a major role. So we lose Lamb there, but like you could still very well go Zeke and Cooper.
They still seem okay. Like what I'm looking at, like you could maybe do like a Cowboys and Niners with the Chiefs or something. Yep. I don't know.
I like that a lot.
So how do you break the tie then between like CEH and Zeke? Like let's say we're going, Cooper here.
In general, I will default to the team that I have the quarterback because, as you said, if we're going to go Dallas and San Francisco, let's go from ADP. I think we probably go with those two.
Yeah, because ADP is about the same. So Cooper and CEH.
Yeah, and we can still probably go Pollard. We can possibly go Gallup.
Or would you go Zeke over Cooper and get your running backs done? No,
I wouldn't because we already have CEH, so we at least have our one running back. I think there's a chance that Zeke even falls more likely than Cooper, but you still have the Pollard aspect as well. And as we said with the 40, so what I was going for before is how do I take the tie between CEH and like a Cowboy is I know that I am counting on the Chiefs going to the Super Bowl because that's where my one quarterback is. On the NFC side, I can do well with either Dallas or whoever that second team we go with is San Francisco. So therefore, I'm choosing the one that I know that CEH is going to be in play for this team to be relevant. There's only a 50% chance or maybe 60% chance, whatever it is, that the NFC team would be relevant with that player.
This San Francisco stack is kind of loaded, man, that you could potentially do.
It really is. It's just
Zeke does go.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
that's fine. All right. So
ordering kind of like by ADP.
Yeah. I like.
And then just leaving Kansas City at the end.
I like what we have there. So from a running back perspective, the most we would have is 3 running backs. We have CEH. We're considering Pollard and Mitchell. I like that.
And this is another tough one, though. Like, do we have to, if this turns out to work out really well for us to smash San Francisco, like how worried are we at getting like a second Cowboy? Because like Elijah Mitchell seems better than Pollard to me.
Agree. So all right. So in this situation, I'm
or
probably
just go
going
Debo and Gallup.
I'm going Debo and Pollard.
Okay.
Basically, ADP plays a major role here. Our next pick is going to be 10, 11 spots, like at the 40. So that's still better than Elijah Mitchell's ADP. People are also more likely to draft players from teams they've already started stacking. So others, whoever has, Dak or someone has CeeDee Lamb, they're more likely to grab Pollard than they are to start with a new stack on Elijah Mitchell here.
I'm going to do a bunch of these, Justin, just to draft different iterations of San Francisco stacks. And Dallas, honestly. Like, I mean, obviously I'm biased because we're literally drafting that right now. But on the NFC side, like, I know those teams have a lot of firepower, a lot of upside. I think I've constantly overrated, Dallas though. So we'll see.
That's fair. But I mean, those are strong offenses that could put up big points in an NFC that, like, I don't know, really this year more than any year I remember in the past, like the playoffs are wide open. Like, yeah, the Bucs are like
pretty nuts. Yeah.
Good and a favorite, but like there's no, this team's definitely making the Super Bowl. Like it's wide open.
Yeah.
So let's be risky. Let's take chances on teams where, as we said, we know we want to get the absolute studs.
Yeah. And the Mahomes stuff is nice because Kansas City has, screwed themselves over with the first round bye. So we're, guaranteed right after let me just double check that.
They still have a chance to get in the first round bye.
Chance. That's a little higher than I thought. They've been on a run here, but it's a pretty small chance. So we're taking the chance that they're not getting that, right? Like that's our
correct. Exactly. If they get the bye, we can always decide like, hey, if it makes sense at the very end to grab like, we're good with the ADP here. I love these 2 picks of Elijah Mitchell and Michael Gallup. And like some people in this situation, you're good here. At the end, they're going to be like, maybe I want to throw in a Jimmy Garoppolo just in case the Chiefs get the bye. But given it's only 14%, I would rather use that as a final kind of stack pick than play it safe with that. Now,
yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we can't be taking backup quarterbacks behind Mahomes because there's a 14% chance Mahomes might play around. Like you again, going back to playing correctly and not playing scared, like you got to just take the L if that happens.
Exactly. And how often is Jimmy Garoppolo going to outscore a Patrick Mahomes that is winning every game and going to the Super Bowl? Like maybe a 20% chance it happens in one of those games. And that's probably even high. Like 10%. Like, yeah, exactly. If it was Trey Lance, I mean,
that's a different story. Okay. So I think based on, on talent, we'd finish this off with Kittle Ayuk, but would you, instead of Pringle? But knowing that like the NFC we're hedged a little bit and we've got 3 KC, does that like alter your thought process at all?
All right. So right now we look at our teams. If Kansas City Chiefs make the Super Bowl and they play Dallas, we'll have, Mahomes, CEH, and Kelsey. And on Dallas side, we have Pollard and Cooper and Gallup. Okay. So that's 6 players, 3-3. On the other side, we have San Francisco of Elijah, Debo, and we're about to add Kittle. So that's 3-3. Still pretty strong. Where I would lean though, because I'm a bit high. I'm a high on Byron Pringle, though his usage most recently. I actually think that like him and Ayuk is not that much more than a coin flip. Like on a per. So I'd put Pringle there and know that, hey, Chiefs make it. Now I'm guaranteed to have one extra wide receiver option, and I'm probably a bit differentiated with my Byron Pringle versus like San Francisco. People are often going to be grabbing Ayuk.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That seemed like on the border. So I'm glad we actually confronted that decision because
but
like
if it was really Kittle, if it was Kittle versus Pringle, and like that was our choice, I would lean Kittle just for the player upside aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're assuming obviously Debo back, and Ayuk's role had been growing and he did have like some upside, but he's still third fiddle, I think, pretty objectively there behind Kittle and Debo when they're all healthy.
And it's games that San Francisco is winning, which means even fewer passing, which means less of an opportunity for Ayuk.
All right. So we get the one quarterback build, 3 RBs, like you said, usually going pretty much max 3 RBs and loading up at the wide receiver / tight end position. So what do we end up with, a 4-3-3 here?
I think that sounds correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Mahomes, CEH, Kelsey, Pringle on the KC side, Mitchell, Debo, Kittle on San Fran, and Pollard, Gallup, Cooper on Dallas. It's kind of nice too that on the Dallas San Francisco hedge, we've got a running back and 2 wide receivers on both sides of that. So it's like pretty balanced regardless of, who's advancing there.
And we don't have any wasted spots or anything, meaning like if you have 3 running backs from the same, 3 running backs that could all be in the same Super Bowl, only 2 of those could actually make it. In here, the most we'd have is 2 running backs. So if they both blow up and they have great games, like you get both points. And then now we need 2 from the remaining of the wide receiver tight end spots.
All right. So that's our discussion on playoff best ball. Again, make sure to check out Justin's article from last year on site, but stick around because I do want to talk to you, Justin, about as I introduced you, co-founder of Own the Moment, and you guys launched your NFT game this year, which must have been really exciting. I know as someone who's a small investor in Own the Moment, I was pretty pumped to hear it, to see the success of. I think you sold out the first round of packs like pretty quickly, which. I don't know. You want to just talk through launching your own NFT, and then we can kind of get into particulars of the game a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. And I mean, so at the end of the day, we've really just been absolutely absorbed, absolutely loving this NFT movement. And more than just the NFTs, it's kind of what the technology enables. And so what we've built is a version of, a lot of people played Madden Ultimate. They played the FIFA game. We take that concept, but bring it to fantasy sports and specifically fantasy football. So at the beginning of the season, you're able to open up a pack, that pack aligned to different kind of teams, positions. So as you see right there, like, hey, there's Jacksonville. Maybe you have the Jacksonville wide receivers card, which would be horrible, but you'd get all those wide receivers for points, and you can take
Don't
these.
Insult the Laviska Shenault fans on this show, Justin.
Oh. When is that going to end? I don't know. Like he's going to he didn't even have that game this year that brought us all back in, but maybe eventually.
3 more guys get hurt. It's going to happen.
There you go. Okay. So San Francisco quarterbacks, you're actually getting an entire position. So it could be Jimmy, it could be Trey, depending on, but the general idea is you take your cards, you enter them into contests, and no entry fee. The contests are completely free. We've given out over $1 million in prizes. And there's a live final coming up in a few weeks down in Miami for people who are winning each week. So it's been a blast. And as you said, the more than anything was just the kind of the community aspects that's been built around it, where you have this, we come from the DFS world. Not all of us can just go win 50, 60K and back 2 out of 3 weeks. It's a very hyper competitive world. And so this adds a bit of a fun, communal, bit more of a relaxed and simple game, while there's also strong edge for people because, hey, if you're, let's say you were big on the Cincinnati wide receivers at the beginning of the year, you had the opportunity to buy those cards, go to the marketplace. There's buying and selling there. So you could get a head start on that and then profit off your knowledge, not only in the contest, but also in the marketplace. But it's fun.
And like you said, your entry fee essentially is like you're purchasing these cards, these NFTs, and you own them. And the utility is that you can use them in these contests. You know, you're not paying to enter these contests. So you get, this utility on top of collecting these cards, which is really neat and, makes it fun. And there's the same level of kind of game theory galaxy brain that we can get into with DFS that we get into here in terms of, okay, KC quarterback projects the best this week, but, X% of the field's going to play KC quarterback. And, that plays into it, makes it a really fun game. How do people get in if they haven't already? I think this is an important question because I've dabbled in the NFT league, which is a similar concept, a little bit different. It's kind of like a dynasty style. And honestly, a lot of times with me with NFTs, whether I have gotten into them or not, has just been dictated with, have I been at my computer at a certain time when someone's talking about it or not? So I kind of had missed out on the initial pack that sold out for the owners club. Like if I want to get in, like what's the best way to do that, and not feel behind, I guess.
Yeah, and so obviously, we are nearing the end of the season. So, when you bought these cards at the beginning of the season, you had an entire 17 weeks to really play those cards in the various contests. So while that regular season is wrapping up, we have launched a playoff contest, and so the playoff contest, we're throwing another $100,000 prize pool in this, again, free to enter. And once you sign up, you'll see there's a marketplace. And so in that marketplace, you can specifically go buy the exact players and teams you want. And there is so much game strategy, like game theory strategy aspects, like we just talked about today for Underdog, but for this as well, because in that situation, you're choosing 11 cards, which is 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and 2 defenses, and then 1 random flex. And so in this scenario, you've got to decide, what is my strategy aspect? Do I go 5 players here from one team, 5 from one team, and then 1 random? Or, if you're choosing the Tennessee Titans, like maybe you don't want to use the tight end from that, even if you're going 4 of the others, because you might have 1 week from Kansas City that outscores 4 weeks of playoffs from Tennessee. So like there's a lot of that game theory aspects, and it's just very fun. And yeah.
I mean, just having the playoff contest, I'm pretty sure I'm going to hit up the secondary market and just like kind of construct my 11 card team, just because I'm like I said, I'm obsessed with the FFPC playoff contest. This is kind of like, a different version of that. So I want to get in on that. So secondary market's best way if people want to participate in that or some of the remaining contests. Then next year, I'm assuming you'll have new packs for the weekly contests, and that'll be announced. Yeah. Where should people what's the timing, do you think, on that? Like probably not until like close to the season, or
we're going to have a lot of surprises in between as well. So there's there might be another football season by a different company that's coming, a different league that's coming out soon. We'll see. Maybe might dabble in some other sports as well. So there's going to be a lot in between. But I think you'll start hearing from us again, maybe around the kind of June, July timeframe, because I hear there's some different kinds of activities that happen before the season actually starts as well that maybe people want to get involved in. So we're going to have lots of fun. Definitely encourage. Check it out.
Are you hinting at a
I'm not hinting at anything. I'm not hinting at anything.
I think there might have been a hint at a best ball NFT contest.
No idea what you're talking about.
So okay. As far as the people do, like, let's say I buy the secondary market, buy some cards to play in this playoff contest. Playoff contest ends. What happens with these cards? Like, is there some utility from these cards moving forward, or what happens to these cards that I bought for this playoff contest?
Yeah, so they're NFTs. You continue to own them. So they always act as collectibles, but there's going to be more than that as well. So during the off season, based off the amount of cards you have, we'll continue to have various giveaways, experience raffles. I think just last week we did some wheel spins to send 4 people to Miami for the live final. And it was just based off kind of the amount of cards that you have. Next year, these cards will then be used in various contests. So we've already made it clear that there's going to be an OG contest that can only use these cards. So everyone that continues to buy these now for the playoffs or already has will get that, access to that contest only with these. We're then continue to kind of tinker with, like, where are some additional opportunities to add value to these? Maybe there's a form of a captain game where these kind of are kinds of ways to stack on top of a Series 2 card. But we'll continue to kind of innovate around this space. I think that's the most fun, is that because, this is built by a team of DFS. My co-founder TJ was at Roto Grinders. We've been in this space for a while. We love just the idea of kind of continuing to find ways to have fun and innovate around this, and the community's been very supportive.
So going back to the secondary market, can you explain how that works from, I guess, like a technical standpoint, but like dumbed down? I'm trying. I can't even think of the best way to word the question, but hopefully you kind of see what I'm getting at, because it is, if you're not familiar with the space, it can be kind of intimidating, like understanding, the different layers. Like, it's pretty easy to buy and sell stuff on OpenSea, but you guys are doing something different, which helps, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, helps keep the fees down.
Right. So we've learned a lot from companies like Top Shot and companies that are really trying to take the blockchain and put it behind the scenes. And so initially, like, hey, you look at some of these projects that are built on Ethereum, and you have to worry about the gas aspect. And if you want to buy one card, you have to pay like $100 just for gas. What we did is, without getting too technical, we built this on a layer 2 solution called Polygon, which pretty much works on the side and eliminates 99% of the gas. So when you want to buy and sell, we're also now able to do it through US dollars. So you can buy with a credit card, you can buy with PayPal. And the experience is just like, hey, you pay with your credit card, you purchase it, you now own it. On the back end, we do kind of the blockchain stuff behind the scenes, but just to kind of obfuscate it and make it as simple as possible for you. And that's something that, like, we're still only a few months into the first season, and we're going to continue to find ways to improve and make that experience even easier. But that's why, at the end of the day, like, that marketplace is just a, hey, buy, click, sell.
Awesome. All right. Anything else that you want to talk about, or?
No, I think this has been great. We'll keep an eye out. We may even have another surprise or two coming over the next few weeks in advance of the playoffs. But no, I mean, just playoff best ball in general, playoff contests in general have always been fantastic, and it's truly my favorite time of the season.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's the game theory, but then you also get a shorter time frame for it to play out versus some of these season-long contests, that we love, don't get me wrong, but it's your money could be tied up for, like, 9 months in some of these contests, whereas playoff, you enter now, come middle of February, you'll know whether you've won or lost probably a while before then. So thanks so much for joining me, Justin, to talk the Owners Club as well as Underdog Playoff Best Ball. Again, check out Justin's article on Establish the Run, how to beat Underdog Best Ball Playoff Challenge. We'll do some FFPC content as we get closer to the playoffs. And if you are curious in hearing me and Madison kind of tilt some of our best ball teams and somewhat do a review of how they've done so far and what the playoffs could look like as far as the best ball mania and the puppy and contests like that, make sure you check out the Establish the Edge episode from last week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.